Good afternoon, everybody. The final panel of the day. So we're going to switch tacks a little bit, as the previous moderator said, and talk a little bit more about the international dimension of the Semiconductors and the CHIPS Act. So I think supply chains are those things that when they work, you don't see them, and when they don't work, they suddenly become a problem. And so I think we've got a great panel here today, both online and here with me, to talk about that problem. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask Damian from the European Commission, who's the head of unit for technology, security, and FDI screening, talk a little bit more about the international dimension of what the European Commission wants to achieve with the CHIPS Act. So, Damian, over to you.
Thank you very much, Will. We're very well aware that the European semiconductor ecosystem is deeply embedded in a globalized and interconnected value chains, and so far. And the system has been, and this ecosystem has been working very well. It's fast, it's highly cost efficient. However, the same features have made the supply chains vulnerable to external and supply shocks, and to also increasing weaponization of trade dependencies. And this is why I think across the three pillars presented by my colleagues Lucy and Colette, the EU CHIPS Act has this inherent international dimension. Now, given that the European The CHIPS Act is best developed in relation with what the others are doing, and not in splendid isolation. Because as you know, beyond the European Union, all major semiconductor players have increased the measures they support towards the sector. And she will, I'm sure, talk about what Japan is doing, but we have the US CHIPS Act to support manufacturing and R&D over a couple of years. China to close the tech gap, but also to ramp up production capacity in a variety of nodes with different tools, and also the very generously funded equity funds, the famously IC funds, which are geared to achieving the Made in China 2025 strategy. Japan will talk about it, and of course South Korea and its tax credits to facilitate or reduce the costs of manufacturing. Now, the Commission has developed this concept of open strategic autonomy. We all come up with our own definition. It seems, no, I'm just kidding. But I think it's a mindset more than anything else. And so it means we cooperate with like-minded partners whenever possible. As well, I'll explain a bit further this cooperation aspect. The partnerships mentioned by Lucy aim at strengthening our resilience, decreasing strategic dependencies. With the partnerships, we want to develop, as they said, joint approaches to address supply challenges, to develop mutually beneficial diversification strategies, but also to monitor and assess the industrial, the trade, and R&D policy strategies of third countries, and finally, minimize potential conflicting objectives on a number of issues, such as those relating to export controls and FDI screening, to instruments that I know very well because I manage those in the Commission. And the TTC with our American partners is a good example of this collaborative approach bilaterally, where, and you've seen the statements, so I don't need to repeat all that, but one of the things I found interesting is to avoid a subsidy race, to monitor what's happening in the sector, and coordinating possible measures that could be effective when we have emergencies. Because in a way, one of the things the sector needs to realize is, as it's becoming more important for all countries in the world and sectors, but with this comes responsibilities. And I think nobody likes these shortages that we've seen, and the disruptions on shortages. And so obviously you need to make sure, and coming from Digitrade, which was one of missions, is also to ensure that what we do complies with our international trade commitments. We need to make sure that the measures we take are proportionate, necessary, and all in accordance with our WTO commitments, but FTA commitments and others. Bilaterally, we also are creating new fora. We have this new initiative to do digital partnerships, a country like Japan, but also some other countries, Singapore and others in Asia. Another platform that is not known at all, or very little known, is the GAMS, and Hendrik from Asia knows this. It's this six-party public-private platform between the United States, European Union, Japan, Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, China and Japan, the six, which meets once a year. And I must say it's a very unique setting where we discuss policy issues, market issues, mostly policy issues affecting the global semiconductor industry, such as support measures, market access barriers, but also commercial encryption policies, IPR protection, customs, and tariffs. And I represent the European Union in the GAMS. So that's another bilateral or plurilateral platform that we use to pursue our interests on the global scale. And finally, in the spirit of the open strategic autonomy, when you have to act alone, you do act alone. So we are also implementing and developing our own set of trade policy tools, and to protect when the security is at stake, our security of supply and other policy interests. So you have there the screening of foreign investments. You have export control of dual-use technology, where we have the regimes, but I think this situation is likely to evolve over time, with probably future controls on emerging technologies that are not yet or not dual-use technologies, but might still be meriting controls. We're also starting to look at R&D collaborations with entities in third countries in the sector, which could be a way to acquire critical technologies that may or may not, these collaborations may or may not circumvent export controls or the screening of foreign investments into the European Union. And then lastly, and I don't know if I've probably exhausted my time, but looking forward, we're aiming at maintaining our strengths by countering distorting and unfair trade practices of third countries, which include distortive subsidies, encryption or cybersecurity requirements employed as a de facto trade barrier, de facto forced or pressurized technology transfer, and harmful extraterritorial export control measures, to name just a few. Now, beyond the dialogues I mentioned, we are also continuing our efforts in the relevant WTO committees to tackle and develop new rules on unfair distortive practices. And of course, when justified, we employ our own trade defense instruments, anti-dumping, anti-subsidies measures. The trade veterans in the room or watching online will remember the use of these tools in the past. And looking forward, we have the foreign subsidy instrument proposal, which is in Council and Parliament, which has also the potential to increase the ambitions of the EU CHIPS Act. I'll stop there. Look forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
No, it's very good summary of all of the tools in the box there. Moving on, next speaker hopefully is there, Mia Petra.
Yes, here I am.
Mia Petra.
Hello.
Over to you.
Thank you. I'm pleasure to participate. Unfortunately, I could not stay in Brussels. I need to take the flight, and I'm back at home in Helsinki for an urgent case here. But then I welcome very much the previous speaker and the idea presented by the Commission side, and then the new European Parliament. I'm working on the international trade also in the ITRE Industry Committee, and then looking forward the good cooperation on the TTC as the vice chair for the US delegation. So this really brings together one example of the area for the big picture that Europe wants to deliver for the future. We want to do the growth strategy based on the twin transition to make a sustainable economy based on the digitalization and then cutting the emissions, so save the climate heating. So on this basis, it's very important to find cooperation, so like-minded countries, and then how to do it. This CHIPS question really blow one example, which I think can be copied in another sectors too. Namely, when we look at the supply chain for the some raw materials, we are today urgently looking every hour on the energy that is needed so that we can have partnerships with the trusted partners. So I think this nicely brings in front of our eyes the need for the industrial policy. It has been long and successful also to have the open economy to boost the innovations and trust that the market will be the leader. And that is still a good idea. So I'm the one really emphasizing the open strategic autonomy. But when we do want to also speed up digitalization, the amount needed for the chips will grow as such. And now when there is uncertainty for some source production amounts, it really requires planning. I also think that one good pressure for the Commission to act comes from the example of the USA. It's not only that the CHIPS Act are going hand in hand on in both continents, but also the USA have been quite actively building coalitions like the Quad countries. And that was also the wake-up call to see that we must be more active, whether it's the digital partnerships, which is again set of mind, but I would also like to it be very concrete, as the digitalization also requires the data transfers and so on and so on. So I welcome the thinking and will not be satisfied with the easy and slow process, but really so that the tangible results can also be heard from Paris TTC, that also this working group on the chips and semiconductors will deliver. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mia-Petra. So moving on, we've got Hide. I've been asked to call him Hide, who's the first secretary at the mission of Japan responsible for energy, tech, and technology and industry. So he's going to talk a little bit about what Japan is doing in this area. So Hide.
Okay, thank you, Vieru, and thank you for giving me opportunity to speak here. I'm Hide Ishii from Mission Japan. And first of all, I would like to touch upon the recent development of semiconductor policy in Japan. And so the shortage of semiconductor supply is, of course, a global issue, and we are totally on the same boat. So our government is making efforts to ensure production capacity in Japan, including a significant amount of financial support. And we try to make the size of it as comparable to EU's one or any other major economies one, as introduced by my colleague. And yes, so as for the supplementary budget, as of the fiscal year 2021, we have worked out $8 billion in the package, and most of it was will be used for the newly establishing semiconductor factory, and the other part will be used for the renewal or renovation of existing factories for like power semiconductors or the microcomputing. And the rest will be used for the R&D. This is a package as of 2021. And as a basis of this financial support, we have established a legal framework last December And we can see how it works on the slide. So, so it's very simple. So the business operators who wish to be supported by the government submit application to the government, and it is examined and certified by Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry. And there are some requirements in this examination, such as the continuous operation of production or obligation to increase production when the chip market is tight, or the operator's internal rule to protect their technology or information. And once they get certified, they get up to 50% of cost by subsidy. So this is how it works in this framework. And as for our view on EU Chips Act, it's quite impressive proposal from the viewpoint of from the Commission in terms of structure and the size of financial support which will come. And I think other partners like US and any other major economies is doing the same way, so to Japan. So, but at the same time, Japan is determined to operate its subsidy policy, respecting the principle of free market, free trade and market economy. And we need to differentiate our policy from the one which is like the one market distorting or without transparency. And I believe, obviously, Japan, EU, and US and share this common value as like-minded partners. So we need to collaborate, coordinate on this policy. And in this respect, we find some interesting points in the proposal of CHIP Act, which is a toolbox, which was discussed many times in this seminar, such as the export control or obligatory information provision by operators in case of emergency, or prioritized production of chips in supply crisis, and joint purchasing of the chips. So we are very much interested about how discussions in Brussels, I mean, the discussion in the Council or Parliament will proceed, and how this kind of government intervention will work. And the other important topic is a partnership between EU and Japan. And as for our partnership with EU, I think we still need to find out and work on what would be the best field to cooperate. So we are in a close communication with close contact with colleagues in Commission. But anyway, we think, so this is a part of our semiconductor industry strategy, and we think the collaboration with international partners is essential for our strategy to revitalize our domestic industry. Especially mid-term to long-term, we expect collaboration on the joint R&D with EU for the next generation chips, which is so-called beyond 2 nanometer chips on the standard. And we would like to establish good communication, good relations with companies and research institutes within EU. So I think there is a discussion going on about the digital partnership in the field of digital between EU and Japan, and hope it will be a good result, and there will be a tangible cooperation in that framework. So thank you very much, and this is my initial comment.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you for the comprehensive explanations of how the policy is going to work. Moving on now, Sarah should be on the... Good afternoon, Sarah. So we have a representative here from Qualcomm, one of the leading sort of technology providers. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to hear your take on how supply chains and the international dimension of the CHIPS Act will work. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Will, and thank you to all the speakers that are here today. I would also like to thank Forum Europe, of course, for organizing this discussion. I'm honored to be on this panel talking about the importance of global partnerships in the semiconductor market. I'll start by introducing Qualcomm's activities and presenting some of the key points we believe are important. Qualcomm is the world's leading fabless semiconductor company, supplying semiconductors to customers in a variety of sectors: smartphone, automotive, IoT, robotics, or Industry 4.0. We have a strong footprint in Europe with more than 4,000 employees and growing. We also have partnerships with operators, automakers, infrastructure suppliers, and other key companies of the ecosystem. We were one of the first semiconductor companies to adopt a fabless business model by inventing and designing semiconductors and working with partners to manufacture them. This model has been instrumental in allowing manufacturers to ramp up quickly and produce high volumes. Qualcomm has developed sophisticated architecture and blueprints for many stages of the supply chain, from how semiconductors must be manufactured to how they will operate once fabricated. We're also very proud to develop revolutionary designs that enable foundational 5G cellular technologies that power the IoT. As you all know, and this is very much today's topic of the conference, it was repeated a few minutes ago by Peter Joel and Damien Levy from the European Commission, the global semiconductor supply chain is complex. An average smartphone alone contains 169 semiconductors, and a car between 1,000 and 2,000 semiconductors. And those semiconductors are often designed, manufactured, and packaged by different companies in different regions of the world. A supply chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and disruption at any stage of the semiconductors can cause significant delay in the shipping of the product in which they reside, and we've seen this. It requires a difficult process with many steps before a semiconductor can be shipped to the customer. And we're facing a record market growth in 2021. It will keep going. It took 50 years to get to a $500 billion market, and it will take 8 to 10 years to reach a $1 trillion market. And this is why we believe Europe should invest in foundry capabilities. Qualcomm has worked with every new foundry that has been successful in the last 10 years, and we're dedicated to sustaining this leadership role and working with EU-based manufacturers to meet the current and future demand. As EU institutions design and implement the EU Chips Act to create a state-of-the-art semiconductor ecosystems, the priorities we foresee can be summarized in 2 points. The first one would be creating leading-edge foundries for advanced and mature nodes to augment and diversify capacity. The aim is not to replace the existing production capacities that are existing all over the world, but very much to complement and to diversify it with Europe's capacity building and leadership. The second point would be enabling a geographically diverse semiconductor supply chain. We believe that international cooperation is the way forward, and I think we can see it on this panel. And we need to think collaboratively in order to build this geographically diverse supply chain, acknowledging that one company or one region will not be able to fulfill current and growing demands. We support the EU Chips Act, more specifically the ambition to boost Europe's market share of semiconductor production to 20% by 2030. We've applied to the Alliance on Processors and Semiconductor Technologies. And similarly, we're in favor of the EU-US announced objective of reaching 50% of the global production. It's definitely ambitious, but we need new and essential capacity to achieve production in leading, advanced, and mature nodes. I would like to conclude by stressing that we all need to think holistically, as production capacity, talent, R&D, and industrial policies all form part of the same ecosystem. This is what the EU and US are pushing for, and hopefully will keep pushing for during the TTC summit of next month, as was mentioning MEP Kumpala Natri. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to the next presentation and our discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that. And I think lots of interesting insights into how industry and a key player in the supply chain is thinking about this. Our final speaker is Andreas. Good.
Hello.
Andreas. Andreas is an economist. He was part of the FIAD Regulatory Scrutiny Board of the Commission. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how an economist thinks that supply chains can remain open in the world that we are living in today. So, Andreas, over to you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this subject.
No, thank you very much, and I'm honored and happy to be in this this session. Can you see me? Can you see me?
Andreas,
Okay.
we can hear you, we can see you.
Okay, I cannot see anything, but that's fine. I'm talking about two aspects in particular. That is the concern that there is no or that there is not the desired semiconductor production in Europe, and that there are considerations to relocate semiconductor production to Europe, and to see this in conjunction with the claim in the communication on the CHIPS Act that the research on what is needed for semiconductor production is available in Europe, which raises the question, why, if there is cutting-edge research, is there not the production that our leading industries depend on? And I think that research to be available depends on complementary educational facilities of excellence, of a research start that is early in a product cycle, and on an excellent of services in a supporting ecosystem that is finance of high-risk research. This cannot be easily relocated. To be a good research location is something that has to be earned historically in a path to such a situation, as many attempts to relocate Silicon Valley have shown. Then there is the fact that certain varieties and high-end semiconductors are only produced in very few locations. And the reason that we wonder about is that it is due to the fact that semiconductor production requires very high upfront fixed costs that, combined with very low transportation costs, makes it cost efficient to produce in a very small number of locations. Any attempt to decentralize such a production structure would mean that we might earn greater supply chain security, but for higher prices for everyone. And it is not clear whether this is a good or a bad deal. It may be a good deal because the low transportation costs that have been perceived, the perceived efficiency of the logistics sector might have underestimated uncertainties that might result from shocks like we have seen with the pandemic. There's also little opportunity to diversify risks in the supply chain because the technological cycles are so short that it does not make sense to have inventories of many semiconductor products. There's also the question whether it is necessary that research and R&D and production collocates in one location. And the history of Silicon Valley, of other centers of technological progress have shown that depending on communication possibilities and depending on transportation costs, it is not necessary. So the question is what policy should do. I have already said that political initiatives to relocate centers of excellence from other places into your own country have proven to be very difficult. The relocation of production by public support is something that may invite retaliation of other countries, and there is the risk of a costly subsidy race. And we should keep that in mind if we race to support support measures that aim at relocating production. This can only be avoided by international cooperation that all the other speakers have already pointed out and talked about in detail. I would add that the question is how agreements about cooperation in research and in the stability of supply chains can be made stable for everybody and not just for like-minded parties, because these days it has become a bit ephemeral who is like-minded. The largest gains from trade have occurred through trade in differentiated products. So there may be a tendency in the market of greater differentiation of chips, and there may be different locations that specialize on different varieties of semiconductors, and that this may create a greater sense of mutual dependency and to arrangements that create greater supply security. Thank you.
A lot of interesting discussions there, a lot of interesting points. We've got to sort of a consensus around maybe subsidies not being a race to the bottom, that there's a need for a diverse supply chain, but there are lots of challenges, as Andreas pointed out. You can't just relocate facilities and fabs and R&D facilities overnight. With that, I'd like to see if there's any questions in the room. But the microphone is coming. For the gentleman here. And then we will just run over by about 5 minutes on the end time, okay?
Thank you very much. My name is Hendrik Abman from the European semiconductor industry. I would like to make a couple of remarks. Maybe the first one to the last speaker. I thought the presentation focused a little bit on the relocation. I'm not sure if we rather would talk, especially with the CHIPS Act, on the location of new capacities in view of future demand. And what I thought is maybe not so much addressed is, the geopolitical situation. Everybody knows there are several issues on the table. I think we had in the past America first. We had maybe in the future we may have China first. We have the situation with Taiwan. So indeed, the geopolitical situation is, let's say, critical. You also mentioned, or maybe I should also mention in this context, there is an increased demand also from customer industries for the chip manufacturing to have increased location, increased capacities at home markets, to be more resilient, to be more independent in view of those factors mentioned. So from an economic perspective, elements may be there, but maybe that is not all to be considered either. In addition, I would like to thank also the speaker from the Commission, Damien Levy, for the interesting remarks he made also on behalf of the Commission in the context of the GAMS, where the Commission also played a major role. And in this context, we also have a close cooperation with the Japanese industry and other industries. Maybe to the Japanese colleague, Mr. Ishii, maybe it would be interesting to refer to what is being planned to happen in Japan. We know there is a joint venture, TSMC, together with the customer industries. This is addressing very relevant industry notes from demanded by industry. Maybe you could also elaborate a little bit on that. I understand it's a cooperation where also Sony is involved. Maybe that is also interesting to look at. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think if we don't mind, we'll go to Hide first, because I know he has to leave fairly quickly. And then I think the first remark was more or less addressed towards Andreas, if I'm not mistaken. So, Hide, do you want to go first, and then we'll come over to you, Andreas?
Yes, thank you. So as you mentioned, TSMC and its joint venture has decided to invest in the Kyushu region, which is the southern part of Japan. And the construction was, I think, started last week, actually. And this is a joint venture between TSMC and some automobile component company, and also the Sony. So this is a joint venture of the supply side and demand side, I think. So this is a good example to the collaboration between supply and demand, I think. But not all semiconductors were used for the foreign countries. So I think this foundry will play a role to enhance the global semiconductor supply chain.
Andreas.
Yes, thank you. And I by no means want to exclude that there should be or can be a vibrant semiconductor industry in Europe. The thing is that it is not a matter of moving production from elsewhere to Europe, but earning a niche in the market in Europe that is a European niche. I also feel confirmed by what the colleague said on the like-mindedness of partners you want to cooperate with. In the multilateral cooperation, it is not a matter of was not a matter of cooperating only with those who don't say my country first, but it was a matter of adhering to rules for everybody. And I'm just wondering whether much is earned if to the supply side, to the supply chain uncertainty, it is added that we have a like-minded uncertainty about not being sure of what will be political developments in the countries that we partner with. And I think that there has to be an international cooperation among all possible partners without being picky on what is like-minded.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to use my moderator privilege and ask the last question, and I'm going to go to Mia Petra here. So we've got the TTC coming up, the Trade and Technology Council coming up in Paris soon. What would you like to see come out of that around supply chains and sort of semiconductors, given that's a key forum for managing this issue?
It is to create trust that there exists a stable plan for investments, because it's still, even though we talk about the quite big number of subsidies, that the kind of market economy and good innovations plays the role. So the creating trust by having the two administration the global bigger players to create the markets that they can do together. Also, I'm very fond of the ideas that looking together for the supply chains where the sensitive parts are, and kind of how far on the similar or common mapping could be done. And there also it grows larger than cross-Atlantics, including the like-minded countries, which we can trust, as the previous speaker very well noted.
Okay. Thank you, Mia Petra. Thank you for that answer. So first of all, I'd like to say, is it this long? Very short. We have one more question, and then I'm going to wrap up for the day and try and wrap up on time. So we'll just have the question, one quick word from each panelist to wrap up, and then I will wrap up for the day. Just shout.
So yeah, building on the TTC question, but more focused on the one that was just recently raised this week with India. Very short. Do you see any? Thank you. Do you see any perspective cooperation on semiconductors within this new framework? Thank you.
EU-India cooperation on semiconductors.
I think this still net has to be developed. You know, it's a leader's announcement, and I think the content will be developed after the announcement. I'd like to come back to what Andrea said, if I may, on like-minded, because I think we work with anyone who matters. So GAMS is with the 6 major jurisdictions that represent more than 90% production. Industrial subsidies, happy too. We've been trying, you know. Come and join us if you want to see how easy it is. This is really challenging. And I think we, as I said, we cooperate on whatever platform, policy dialogue we can, where we can advance our interests, and fully agree with you that we need stronger disciplines. And I think the area of what you could call sovereign wealth funds or publicly funded investment funds are an interesting area of where we could look at how to increase transparency, for sure. But, you know, Turkeys don't vote for Christmas, huh? And so this is something that takes time, and we will continue relentlessly to try to achieve this. But like-minded partners, and I think in the current circumstances, it has even more importance. I also do sanctions now. I think it's very clear where you have like-minded or not, and I don't think it's ephemeral at all in that case. But I think we are flexible, and we look at every platform possible. I think it was important, I think, to clarify these points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll do a quick round of closing comments from each of the speakers, and then I will close the conference. So, Hide, some closing remarks quickly.
Yeah, so thank you for this opportunity. And so there are still many work streams and discussions going on about the cooperation between Japan and the EU. So I think this seminar is also contributing to that discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mia-Petra.
I would maybe underline the need for the different kinds of chips, because then I wouldn't like to see that the kind of competition internally, whether it's more important to have a car or a mobile phone. So a variety, which is also very crucial to our critical infrastructure, needs to be looked at. And it's normally not going very well if we start planning pilot state by state, or even commission too much detailedly. So this is one which a risk that I would like to avoid.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, some final remarks from you.
Sure, happy to. So to conclude, I'd like to say that we welcome the integrated approach of the EU Chips Act, which links very well research, innovation, investment, and talents. I think it was broadly touched upon today. And as I was previously outlining, Qualcomm supports investment in leading-edge foundries to achieve EU and EU-US targets, and to continue investing in advanced and mature nodes to augment and diversify capacities. Long-term resilience requires geo-diversified supply chains that will support the demand growth, and governments can definitely play a key role in intensifying this action. Qualcomm will remain a partner in this endeavor, support multilateralism, and encourage ambitious production targets and diversification.
Thank you. Andreas.
To end with a short remark, it would be desirable not just to cooperate in trade, but to cooperate in research and in production, which could generate extra benefits. And I believe that this could even create like-mindedness among partner countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The message is there for you all to divine. It only then remains for me to say thank you. And lots of discussion still to be had. So I'd like to thank the Organizers Forum Europe and the team here, James and the others. And I guess we finish in the classic Brussels way of a round of applause for everybody. So thank you very much, everybody.